Most store-bought salsas don't use fresh tomatoes. They use heavily processed tomato paste or concentrate, then add preservatives to keep it shelf-stable for months, sometimes years. The result is a watery, one-note product that coats a chip with almost no flavor. We went through 12 of the most common brands you'll find at any major grocery store, 8 that fall into this processed category and 4 that actually hold up, and the difference in texture and taste is not subtle. Number 1, Passe Picante sauce. Pace is probably sitting in your parents' fridge right now, and it's been there for months, which tells you something already. Fresh salsa made with real tomatoes doesn't last that long. Flip the jar over and read the ingredients. The first thing listed isn't tomatoes, it's tomato puree, which is concentrate that's been cooked down and then watered back up. That tomato got processed twice before it touched the jar. And you taste it. Paste pours out thin, almost like pasta sauce with no chunks and no resistance. The acidity you notice isn't from peppers or tomatoes breaking down naturally. It's citric acid, added to hit a target pH and stop bacteria. That's a safety fix dressed up as flavor. Number 2, Tostitos Chunky Salsa. Tostitos puts the word chunky right on the label, and that label is lying to you. Open the jar and what you're looking at isn't chunks, it's tomato pieces that have been cooked down so hard the cell walls collapsed, leaving soft, spongy bits floating in watery liquid that separates the second it hits the bowl. That liquid isn't tomato juice. It's what's left when the cellular structure of a vegetable breaks down completely from high heat processing. And the aftertaste is bad, flat, and chemical in a way that sits on your tongue after you swallow. Frito-Lay sells you the chips and the salsa, so the salsa just needs to be recognizable, not good. Number 3, Old El Paso Thick and Chunky Salsa. Old El Paso built its whole identity around Taco Kit Night. The shells, the seasoning packet, the salsa, all in one box. When the salsa is just one piece of a bundled sale, it never has to be good on its own. The thick in Thick and Chunky doesn't come from real tomato density. It comes from modified food starch added because the tomato base, after processing, isn't thick enough to hold that shape without help. And you taste the gap. There's a brief hit of something tomato adjacent at the front and then nothing. No heat building, no pepper finish. That's because dry chili powder replaced actual jalapenos. General Mills has owned this brand since the 1990s, and they make cereal, not salsa. Number 4, Great Value Thick and Chunky Salsa. Great Value is Walmart's store brand, and the price on that jar tells you exactly what's inside before you even open it. The ingredient list says diced tomatoes in tomato juice, which sounds reasonable, but that tomato juice is reconstituted concentrate. So you've got real tomato pieces sitting in processed tomato liquid, and that liquid pulls the flavor down instead of carrying it. There's also a sweetness that doesn't belong in salsa. It's not added sugar, it's the concentrate base coming through because there aren't enough real jalapenos to balance it out. And the texture matches soft, mushy tomato pieces that feel like they've been sitting since last year. At this price, you'd expect some trade-off. You don't expect the flavor to disappear completely. Number 5, Kroger Thick and Chunky Salsa. Kroger's salsa looks fine on paper, same price range as Great Value, same thick and chunky claim, same basic ingredient setup. But there's one thing that sets it apart, and it's not good. The pepper flavor is almost completely gone. You taste tomato first, and then nothing follows. No heat, no garlic, no onion, no finish at all. Jalapenos are listed in the ingredients, but they're buried so far down the list that the quantity is clearly small and high heat processing kills whatever capsaicin was left anyway. The chunks are actually visible, which puts it ahead of a few others on this list. But texture without any flavor is just mush with a label on it. A can of Rotel would do more for you. Number 6, Herdez Salsa Casera. Herdez Salsa Casera is the first jar on this list that actually tastes like someone made it on purpose. The ingredient list is 5 items: tomatoes, water, onion, serrano peppers, iodized salt. No citric acid, no modified starch, no preservatives you can't pronounce. And you taste exactly that when you open it, because one taster described it as having a cheerful freshness and surprising piquancy that puts it closer to fresh pico de gallo than anything else in a jar at this price. The serrano peppers deliver real heat that builds slowly and sits at the back of your throat. That's what actual pepper does. It's still a shelf-stable jar, but the formula was clearly built around flavor first. Number 7. Chi-Chi's Thick and Chunky Salsa. Chi-Chi's has been riding on restaurant nostalgia since the chain shut down in 2004. And what you're buying now is a licensed product with no connection to the original kitchen. Open the jar and you'll notice a floral aftertaste that lingers after you swallow. The kind of off note that comes from spice extracts instead of whole spices. It doesn't go away quickly. The tomato pieces are soft and waterlogged, same high heat breakdown you saw with Tocitos, and the pepper flavor is so weak that the sweetness from the tomato base takes over completely. It tastes closer to marinara than salsa. Number 8. On the Border Salsa. On the Border sells you the memory of chips and salsa at the table, but what's in that jar has nothing to do with what came out of a restaurant kitchen. Restaurant salsa gets made fresh and served within days. Jarred salsa has to survive months on a shelf, and the processing that makes that possible strips the flavor down to almost nothing. On the Border's version is noticeably thin, and the tomato flavor is faint because water gets added back into a concentrate base to hit the right consistency. The pepper distribution is uneven too, so some bites have a little heat and others have none. And this one sits at the higher end of mass market pricing, so you're paying extra for a logo. Number 9, Mateo's Gourmet Salsa. Mateo sits in the gourmet section and actually belongs there. The tomatoes are fire roasted before processing, and that step changes everything. Roasting drives out moisture, caramelizes the natural sugars, and locks in a slight smokiness that survives into the final jar. You can taste the char. It's not sharp or bitter, it's just deeper than anything a straight concentrate base can produce. The texture holds up too. Scoop it with a chip and it stays there, it doesn't pool or separate. That thickness comes from actual tomato density, not starch. Fresh garlic and onion replace the dried powder versions you find everywhere else, and the difference shows up in the finish, brighter and cleaner than you'd expect from a jar. Number 10. Mrs. Renfro's Salsa. Mrs. Renfro's has been made in Fort Worth since the 1940s, and it's still family-owned. Which matters because no conglomerate has come in and stripped the recipe down to save money. Pick up the jar and look at the color before you even open it. It's darker and more orange-red than most salsas you'll find on that shelf, and that's because there's more actual tomato in it. Thin, pale salsa is mostly water. This isn't. The pepper flavor is real and specific. Habanero tastes like habanero. Ghost pepper builds and sticks. Jalapeno stays clean. Each variety tastes different because the ingredients are actually different, and you can't fake that with a concentrate base. Number 11. Green Mountain Gringo Salsa. Green Mountain Gringo comes from Vermont, and that's exactly why it's good. Nobody in Vermont is trying to undercut a Texas competitor on price, so they just focused on making the salsa taste right. The ingredient list includes tomatillos alongside the jalapenos and fresh onion, and tomatillos add a tart, slightly citrusy bite you won't find in any tomato-only jar on this list. The pieces actually hold their shape too, chunky without being stiff, with a slight unevenness that tells you nothing got cooked down to paste. Number 12. Frog Ranch Foods. Salsa. Frog Ranch is probably the least known brand on this entire list, and that's actually what makes it worth your attention. Because a small producer with no major shelf space to protect has no reason to cut corners on the recipe. The tomatoes are real and minimally processed, and the acidity you taste comes from the tomatoes themselves, not from citric acid added at the end of the line. Those are two completely different things on your tongue. Every bite has heat, and it's consistent all the way through the jar because real peppers got distributed evenly, not sprinkled in as an afterthought. You won't find it at every major chain, but it's available online and the search is worth it. Next time you're in that aisle, flip the jar over. If tomato puree leads and citric acid appears before jalapeno, put it back.